Sir, we have another one. Skong has gone missing.
Skong?
Sorry, that's Hollow Knight Silksong, sir. It's been 6 years since the last update.
A tragedy. I'll add it to the board. Just seems you can't go a day without another report of a game like Carlson or Silksong going missing. I just wish there was some kind of connection, something we could go off of to crack this case.
Wait, don't you see it? It's been under our noses this whole time. Anyone who's ever anticipated a game's launch has likely experienced the anxious frustration that I'm way too familiar with. Believe me, if you thought the wait for Silksong was rough, you should try waiting 12 years for Pikmin 4 after the 9 years before Pikmin 3. Those were dark days. But there was a light at the end. The sad reality, however, is that for every one game that releases, there's almost 99 games that never made it to the finish line. And you may be thinking I'm exaggerating, but my, research has shown that this may even be a low estimate. And so we set out to find why all these indie games are failing, or not coming out. And to figure that out, we took a long look in the mirror at our own failures. Oh boy.
Now, the first game that comes to mind when I think about failures of mine is a game called Scramble. But here's the thing. That game technically came out. It's up right now on GameJolt as Scramble, and was a school project I made when I was like 15. It's a small fighting game where you have two squares that are constantly jumping, trying to knock each other off the edge of a map to win. It's pretty fun, but definitely a product of its time. I really liked the idea for this game though, and a couple years ago, I set out to make a new version of it on Steam. And I got kind of far, built out a few maps, got the player controllers working, menu system, etc. But after building it out and testing it with a couple friends, I noticed it just didn't feel fun to play. Something about the movement mechanics just wasn't interesting for more than 20 seconds, and I realized that it seemed a lot more at home as a random browser game than an actual full release. And I find this being the main reason a lot of my personal projects end up not coming out. I'll spend the time building out the core gameplay and getting it all down in engine, but by the time I do, it's either totally lost its spark, or I realize that the original idea just wasn't as good as it sounded in my head. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with this. Sometimes an idea just isn't a good one, and sometimes it's not the right time for an idea. And it's better to end up finding this out early on in the prototyping phase, like I did here, than say 3 years deep into a project that you only end up releasing out of sunk cost.
Back when I started game dev, I had a few bad habits, which led to a few mistakes. One of those mistakes was Ember. You played as a weird masked zombie rabbit thing across some nether-like lava place. And I wish I could say there was more of a vision to the game than that, but no. I made this game pretty soon after Hollow Knight released because I, like most of the world, was obsessed with that art style at the time. Now I actually really like the art of this project, but that's about all this project had going for it. There was no story, and definitely no hook. Every game has to have something to offer, and this game was, at least in terms of gameplay options, about as generic as a platformer could be. But don't get me wrong, I don't regret working on it, because I learned a couple of valuable skills that helped me finish every project I've started since this one. The first thing is to stick to what you're good at, or what you want to be good at. At the time I was only interested in making what I thought was popular, not necessarily because I wanted to be making it. You can do that. Lots of devs have, and maybe even found success, but from my experience, it's a lot harder to enjoy. The other lesson I learned, and yes I stole this from a book, is to begin with the end in mind. That sounds simple, but I bet a lot more games would come out if the developers would begin at the end. And I mean both in the planning and development. The biggest problem with game launching is scope creep. Every game developer has experienced the urge to change their project to something much harder halfway through. The obvious answer is to make plans for the whole game before starting, but that can be intimidating. One thing this project taught me is that you don't have to develop the game in the order that it will be played. It can take a lot of pressure off if you make the beginning and the end first, and then meet in the middle. This, for me at least, has made my scopes flexible and stopped me from derailing the project.
Now, this is a game I've never actually talked about on this channel and not a lot of people know about, but it's also one that had a lot of progress on it made before I eventually ended up dropping it. This is the Make Your Own game. It's a Stanley Parable-like game where you get walked through creating your own game, where comedy and chaos ensues. Like, you're originally prompted to choose the genre, then you're put into a version of the game and you get to choose different assets before going down different paths based on what you picked. Now, this project failed for a very different reason. I really liked working on it, and all the playtesters really enjoyed it, and I think the idea is solid, but as I was developing it, I kept getting caught up on my own ability to actually make the game. This was at a time when I wasn't really familiar with making 3D projects, and it showed. I was really struggling to develop what I actually wanted to happen in the game, so I ended up dropping it out of frustration, which definitely sucks, as this is a project that I really liked working on and would happily return to now, considering how much more experience I have in 3D. The takeaway for this project is really just to know your limits. I went into this with the how hard could it be mindset before being shown how hard it could be, and it really shows. It's important to consider the difficulty of making a game versus your actual ability and not let the idea or your own hubris blind you. If only I had something better to learn with at the time. Something sleek, something cool, something like Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video.
If you're watching this video, you likely enjoy learning as much as I do, and if so, there's no better way to start than with Brilliant, where you can effectively learn while doing. Brilliant is a learning app that helps you explore complex topics like math, science, computer programming, and AI in a deep and meaningful way. And I'm not talking about sitting through boring lecture videos. Every lesson is interactive. You're making choices, solving problems, and getting instant feedback as you go. It's designed to help you think through ideas, not just memorize them, and that makes the learning stick. One thing I really love about Brilliant is their first principles approach. Instead of throwing a bunch of formulas at you and hoping you follow along, they start from the ground up. You build your understanding layer by layer, which makes the learning much more fun and satisfying. Whether you're a student, a working professional, or just someone who enjoys learning new things, it meets you where you are and challenges you to keep going. So if you want to sharpen your mind, learn something new, or just enjoy a more effective, robust way to learn, I highly recommend checking out Brilliant. To get full access to Brilliant for a full 30 days, just search brilliant.org/plasmastudiosdev, scan the QR code, or visit the link in the description. You can also use it to get 20% off on an annual subscription. Thanks, Brilliant.
Now, the next game I want to talk about is a bit of a weird subject. For those of you who don't know, Color War is a bullet hell adventure game I've been working on for a while now, and I mean a while. The first devlog I did on it was in 2019, and the first time I started working on it was in 2017, so it's a long time coming. And if you're also getting confused and wondering how 2019 was a long time ago, I'm sorry, but I'm with you. This game's gone through several iterations in the time I've been working on it, and to be honest, that's because I've gone through several iterations in that time. The original version of this project was just a little boss rush game where you fight these guys and try to make your way to the end. A lot of people liked this game and told me to keep making it, but as development went on, I found myself really struggling to enjoy making or playing it. Now, this is partially because I was making it in Construct 2 at the time and really struggling to create the battles I wanted to, and also because it really just didn't connect with me. I felt like the game needed something bigger, like a story, for example. So in came the second iteration of Color War, and one you may be familiar with if you've followed the channel for a long time. It's the one I made right after first starting Unity, and it shows. It's not necessarily a bad game, but it has a lot of, let's say, design choices that I wouldn't make nowadays. Now, unlike the first version of Color War, I went into this one fully intending to release it. The issue was, I went into the production of this game with nothing but determination, hopes, and dreams. No plan for the story, no plan for the gameplay, just started making stuff, and it shows. Everything feels pretty disconnected and random, and at no point does the player know why or really what they're even doing. I ended up eventually scrapping the majority of what was produced for this version of the game in favor of starting over with a new story written out and the end in mind, which leads to the most modern version of Color War. This game isn't necessarily a failed game, at least not yet, as it's still in development, but the first two versions of it are definitely failed, and hopefully never going to see the light of day again. But while looking through all of these failed projects and versions of games that will never come out, it made me wonder, how in the world are we even getting games out in the first place? I mean, I looked through my Unity project history, and there's literally 47 game projects that were scrapped or abandoned versus 3 that actually came out. So let's get into some of our published games and see what we did differently from the unpublished ones.
First up, we got Little Shell's Adventure, a beach-themed adventure game about a turtle on a quest to commit stabby-stabbed at crab dudes. This is the first game that I made from start to finish and launched on Steam. To be honest, I'm surprised we finished the game. It had all the right ingredients for another failed project, but it had one major perk, a set deadline. I knew when I started the game that I only had a year before I would serve a mission for my church. Now, it probably would have only taken 6 months to create if I hadn't been using this computer from the Stone Ages, but I did the best with what I had. Starting the project, things seemed great, but halfway through, I became a much better game developer and realized that I'd have to redo most of the systems and art to keep it consistent with my current level. And for those who remember, it was a pretty stark contrast. So my main takeaway is to try to have a solid deadline for your project. It may not be a hard deadline like going on a mission for 2 years, but pick something that encourages you and make it more official than a day on the calendar. Let someone else know your goals and timeline. That's one of the main reasons we started this channel. Speaking of deadlines, I have one for you. You have till the end of this video to become an epic plasma gamer. Oh, what's an epic plasma gamer, you ask? Well, we have our lead detective on the case.
I've been scouring the city for traces of the alleged non-epic regular gamer. One who's not only never hit that bell button, but hasn't even hovered the subscribe button to see its hover animation. But the pieces are finally falling together. And soon I'll know every last person who hasn't subscribed, every single soul that's notificationless when our videos come out, and every sorrowful sap that thinks they can survive on these streets without being in the Plasma Studios Discord. And when I finally piece together this puzzle and find that person, they better watch their back. So I want to talk about the first Steam game I ever released and why I released it. I've spoken about it a little bit on this channel, but this is The Fire. It's a 3D platformer physics game where you roll around and collect these little orbs while the music and world grows around you. Very simple, very short. The whole game is usually beaten within an hour, and as you can imagine, it was not really a hard game to make. It's the first game I made in Unity, like literally the first project I ever created, and it shows. There's a lot of jank and a lot of things that would have been done differently now, but something kind of weird happened during the development of this game for me. When I first started making it, it was more of a tech demo to see what I could do in Unity. I made the world rise, the collection of these crystals, and that was all good, but once I had that in place, I couldn't stop. I just kept making more levels, adding new mechanics, etc., just genuinely having fun making the game. And by the time that fun was running out, I had a finished product. The whole development cycle was about a month for The Fire, which, makes sense considering this would likely take a day for someone more experienced. And so after finishing the game, I decided to publish it. I originally had no intent to actually publish or even really to finish the game, but I just ended up having so much fun working on it that it happened. And I think the reason it came out is the same reason I even do game development in the first place. Because it's fun to create brand new experiences. It's fun to tweak a random vent mechanic for 40 minutes until it feels right. And it's satisfying to have people interact with your work in a way as tangible as video games. And if the game you're working on is fun to make and fun to play, then of course it's not going to fail, even if it is just some random shovelware 3D platformer.
And that's what I think has happened to all these missing games.
That's not a bad theory. I'll keep that in.
So, next time you go making a project, remember your 3 Ds of game development.
Who are you talking to?
Deadlines, determination, dodging corrupt publishers, don't not make the game.
That's more than 30.
Never start a land war in Asia.
That doesn't even start.
If you can't make money, sell your fridge.
Okay.
Eat top ramen.
Okay.
Get Throw Bro on Steam. If it seems like a pyramid scheme, it probably is. Don't eat burritos without a permit. Always ask about the horse before you ride it. Also make sure to subscribe.